So I'm tempted to say tutti frutti. Here comes the director, Lisa Cortez. And I'd like to call Nate Cohen out. We have a tradition to give a golden thumb.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
And you know, actually, as I'm looking at this, it's actually heavier and shinier, gold, more gold than usual. Maybe they're making them even better now.
It's the Little Richard influence.
The Little Richard influence. You have the Little Richard thumb. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. I am so honored to receive this, not only for myself, but the incredible team who came and supported me in making this film and the vision that I brought to it. So on behalf of us all, thank you, thank you, thank you, Mr. Ebert.
Thank you.
Super heavy.
We're going to put you in the center chair.
Okay.
And I'd like to call out to the stage Brenda Butler, Professor Brenda Butler, and former writer at the Tribune. And I think, did you?
I was an editor. Yeah, I was one of
And she also edited for Gene Siskel. So why don't you sit on this side of her? I'll sit here. And Dr. Douglas Arnell Williams. I'm going to put you on this side. Yep.
What did you say?
You got a question for us?
Oh, no, definitely. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, as a journalist, documentary filmmakers are like, you're our cousins, you know? I mean, this film, Lisa, I was impressed about the range and all the research you did, and it's encyclopedic. So can you tell us a little bit about how you did the research on Little Richard and where you began?
Thank you so much. You know, as a student, I was I guess I'm a closet historian. I love particularly discovering hidden histories. You know, there's so many stories that we think we know all about them, but there's so much more. And Richard really opened an opportunity to look at not only his story, but he's on this collision course with history. I understood very early on that I had to center Richard's voice, to give him the agency that he thought he was denied. So with my researcher, the wonderful Jerobi Moorhead, and a couple of other people on the team, we cast a very wide net to find as many archival moments where he is telling his story. In addition, I read a ton of articles, I talked to family and friends, I visited Macon, Georgia several times before I even started shooting. I just looked everywhere to kind of put together not only what he tells us, but also to interrogate some of the things he tells us, because as we heard, he wasn't the most comprehensive storyteller. And so that was the device that then led me to have my scholars, our chorus of people who are adjacent to him in a lived experience. They're certainly younger than him, but they've studied him, and they are there to also be a counterpoint to some of the history, because you know, I take my job as being a journalist. Like, I'm not just going to let Richard tell his story filled with errors. I had to have other people that I realized in my research could fill in the gaps that he was maybe misinterpreting at times.
Let's back up one step. How did you come to the topic to Little Richard in the first place?
Richard died in the spring of 2020. It's very strange when we think about it was just 4 years ago that all of us were at home during the pandemic and trying to grapple with what was going on in the world, which was just so challenging. And when he died, I was in the middle of finishing my voting rights film, All in the Fight for Democracy. We had to go virtual. We were working like 14 hours a day. And I started listening to his music. I was reading tributes from people like Bob Dylan, who said, when I was in high school, I just wanted to be in Little Richard's band. And Bob Dylan's tribute to him online was, he said, he was the spark for me that inspired me to do what I did. And I'm like, okay, we've heard other stories, but this is Bob Dylan, who so rarely speaks out in this way, talking about the importance of Little Richard. Of course, there's people like Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, Vernon Reid from Living Colour, a bunch of artists, and they were all talking about, like, he's the one. And the Little Richard I knew was shut up. It was the comical person who's almost like a foil. And I realized that when I started going deeper and deeper, that he really is someone who is recognizing all this talent and giving them performative cues that they then take and incorporate as their own. And we did not have the correct historical thread to credit him for his contributions to, I think, like one of the greatest things that America has produced is rock and roll. We've exported it to the world. It's fueled revolutions. And so rock and roll is more than, a spirit and a music. It's an anarchical force that has contributed to great change. And this man from a little town in the Jim Crow South was an important catalyst for this movement.
As far as Macon, Georgia is concerned, Roderick Cox, who was here with the Conducting Life movie, said that he was from Macon, Georgia, and he said that Little Richard went to his church, and so he would go and see, they would hear the old music, the Tutti Frutti music, but then on Sundays they'd see Little Richard and going to church, and and his family knew Little Richard. So.
Yeah, a lot of folks come from Macon, Georgia. We live down the road from Macon at the moment. But I made a music documentary. It took me like 4 years. How long did this take? And it's just a monumental achievement of research and weaving stuff together. And you just did a beautiful job of it.
Thank you.
How long did it
so
take?
Much. 2.5 years. Yeah.
You're faster than I am.
Well, we were very lucky that we had great partners with CNN Films. And what I always loved is, we get an idea, you work with a team, you put a deck together and a little sizzle trailer, you go out and you have these meetings and you pitch. The movie I pitched is the movie I made. I always wanted to have those dreamscapes with the performances, and oftentimes, not everyone finds this acceptance, but the folks at CNN Films and Bungalow Entertainment and Rolling Stone, like everyone who came together, it was a big posse, but was there to support the vision that I had.
So where did all the bubbles and stars and floating stuff come from?
You mean my energy particles?
If that's what you call them, yeah.
You have a couple on your shoulders dancing. I think we all do.
I call it dandruff.
No. Well, I think that Little Richard was otherworldly.
That was exactly the word
He
I had written.
arrived like the Big Bang and brought this energy that he ignited that grows through the course of the film, and that it dances upon all of us. It's a part of this beautiful DNA that he has left with us. And you know, the thing with the film is, I love tons of documentaries, especially music documentaries from Wim Wenders, Buena Vista Social Club, Summer of Soul, and I could go on and on. But I wanted to break the fourth wall with this film. I wanted to try some new things out. I wanted to get a sense of emotionality, interiority, finding a visual vocabulary that was different. And that was in keeping with Richard and his spirit. I always say I had to honor everything that he was showing and sharing. And so the energy particles are part of the explosiveness of his presence that people felt, and was a way to visually show them.
One more question about the movie, about making documentaries, and let you ask the question. I know the bane of all documentary filmmakers is the talking head. And you did something remarkable with your talking heads. They're all facing toward camera. They're lit in a very gentle kind. I mean, as counterpoint to Little Richard. I mean, how did you decide on how you're going to film the talking heads?
A lot of the documentaries that I've done, I do use the iDirect, which is something you attach to your camera so that your subject can look in the mirror and see you. And I think it helps you to have an intimacy in the conversation that you're having with them. It's, once again, breaking...
It's the Errol Morris.
Yes, the Errol Morris invention to break the fourth wall. And there's actually this other thing happening. There are different colored backgrounds depending on what bucket someone's in. So a lot of the entertainers are in this world that's kind of blue with sparkles, except for Mick Jagger, because when I went to London at the last minute to interview him, we couldn't get the background there in time, and we had to shoot in his office, but it's okay. We got Mick Jagger. I don't care. I don't care about the background, okay? But then our scholars are in this kind of brown, the background's a little wavy. I wanted it to feel like backstage. And then family and friends have a different color palette. It's a more reddish. So I was kind of thinking just about who these people are and what's the tonality and temperature connection and the worlds that they inhabit. And when I start a film, I always think of what are my buckets. You know, I knew in this case I needed family and friends, I needed artists who had worked with him, influenced by him, and I needed my scholars. And they all exist in conversation with him from different places. But the consistent thing is speaking to camera. And that directness, which is also mirroring his directness, oftentimes in his conversations with us.
I feel that it is encyclopedic. I appreciate that. I'm a big documentary lover. Grew up watching those. I think it was my dad's way of me having some intelligent conversation when he got home, and I'm sure this would have merited one of those as well. What did you discover unique? Because I know you've done your research, but there was something that maybe you were like, wow, I didn't know this about Little Richard. Or also, what did we not get to see? I mean, I noticed everything doesn't make it to the final product. There's something else that's going to probably be in a biopic film. I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, what I discovered was that whole Princess Lavone drag experience that he had. and also this deeper history. There's my composer Tamar Colley Brown just has a new opera coming out about a gentleman in Washington, D.C. in the 1800s, William Swan, who was a drag queen, who had parties, was arrested. And this is a part of American history that we don't know about, the broad range of spectrum of people who have contributed to the texture of this world that we have. And so learning about that was, I think, his experience was really cool. When you're doing a film for a broadcast partner, you have a runtime, 98 minutes. So there was a lot of things that we had to cut. I wanted to talk more about the music industry and the mechanics of that. And that's why John Branca makes a very small appearance in the film. He's an entertainment attorney. And he's actually Michael Jackson. He was his attorney when Michael was alive, and he controls the estate now. He was married by Little Richard. And one of the things Richard talks about in his book, he says, well, when Michael Jackson bought the ATV catalog that had my music in it, he gave me money. And I was like, well, I really need to check this out, because with Richard. So I said to John Branca, did Michael give him money? And he said, yes, he actually did. Michael recognized the importance of Richard to his career and what had happened in terms of, I understand Art Roop said, turn your deal, I don't understand giving somebody $200 for the Tutti Frutti master. No, I don't understand that. I understand he broke his contract, but at a certain point, typically when a company recoups the investment that they've made in an artist, then the artist is going to see some money back. And when you look at the tremendous success of his songs, even him not performing them, it truly was egregious that at a certain point he didn't see any additional money. And so that was something I wanted to get into more, but as you can all tell from our conversation, it takes us off on a tangent that not everybody really wants to, get that part of the economics.
Yeah, but I appreciate that, because there are a couple of films, even the one on Miles Davis with Don Cheadle, and they say, my money, my music, you own my music, so I appreciate it. Even Cadillac Records, other musical works, including even when John Lee Hooker talks about the music industry, saying, no, I didn't want my daughter to go into this because I know how dangerous and you can't recoup a lot of what you put into it.
Yeah, and I think for me, I come from the music industry. Before I started making films, my first job was at Def Jam. I worked in that world for a long time, and I've seen a lot of brilliant artists, and I saw a lot of bad deals. So I'm always trying to give a cautionary tale, particularly to new artists who are coming in, because music publishing is the money you make, as the famous Charles Koppelman said, while you're sleeping. Your music can be performed by other people, and there is the royalties coming in, and so it has tremendous value that is oftentimes has been lost.
So who paid for all the music in your film?
It was in our budget. But when I started the film, I brought in an old friend of mine who I've known from the music business for a long time, who's now a music supervisor. His name is Jonathan Feingold. He actually won the Music Guild Supervisor of the Year for this film. And I said, Jonathan, we have to make certain that we can actually license these songs, because you can't make a film with Little Richard and not have at least, I gave him 15 songs that I had to have. And Concord Music actually controls the catalog now. And we were able to make a deal with them, and then with Sony Music, because those are the two parties that have the essential works by him.
Was it a financial or creative decision not to show Little Richard perform a complete song? And him singing a song from beginning to end, show the entire...
It's mostly financial, yeah. We had certain time constraints. If you go over them, it's going to become a lot more money. And so that was something that we were always mindful of backing into in using a performance.
I like the way you use the people who you interview to kind of explain Richard's impetuous personality, because sometimes he got in his own way. And I wanted to know, and when you're outlining that story, and everybody actually kind of supports, you know, when he makes a bad decision, when he makes a good decision, and then when the industry does him wrong, and his colleagues do him wrong. So how did you begin to draw that line and connect all those dots?
I worked with two really great editors, Jay Costetter and Nenev Minier, and we were in different places. So we'd come together virtually, and there's something called a virtual whiteboard that we would pull up onto our shared Zoom, and we would actually, you can put your scene cards on the whiteboard and move them around during the course of the conversation. And so there was, you know, a kind of cradle to grave story that I knew I was telling, but I also wanted to zoom out from Richard. I wanted to see the broader cultural context, you know, how he is in conversation with the world around him. You know, to look at Tutti Frutti in 1955 and Emmett Till in 1955, you understand why someone like Little Richard is so amazing to be presenting himself in the way that he does and advancing in this subliminal way conversations about how one can be. And so there were themes that we were looking at that went on the board. We would look at our scenes and say, okay, can we amplify a theme here? Can we go to this broader, you know, kind of cultural overview? I was an American Studies major, so I think it was a lot of that training that I brought into that, because it's an interdisciplinary study, and it's a study that is looking at culture and what are the movements and the individuals. And it's funny, you guys were talking about Studs Terkel on a panel the other day, which was something that is a very important sacred text in that discipline. And, you know, Studs Terkel, what I always loved is how he found the right voices in the movements to tell the story of working people. So I think that, you know, in the back of my mind, I am always thinking about who are the really unique voices who are instrumental to telling this story. And Miss Ernestine, the lady he was married to, I couldn't find her. And we were finishing the film, and she called me, and she said, I don't want to be on camera, but there are things that are important to Richard that I would like to have the opportunity to say. And I said, Miss Ernestine, can I send somebody to your house and record you? She said, sure. And that's why you don't see her. But
yeah, I wondered about that.
but it was so late. And it was really funny because I was at my friend's wedding and the reception was bad and I heard like every other word. And I said, okay, I think I understand. But I loved to have her perspective on him, because even after they divorced, they stayed friends. She was with him when he passed away. And so I felt that, yes, we had that recording from near the end of his life, but she really gave us a grounding and a finality to where he was and where his heart was.
Were there any other sort of holes that you discovered in the editing process that you had to go out and fill with shooting other folks?
No, because I had like a plethora of people that I was able to speak to, and then I had so much incredible archival from him that I knew for 98 minutes I would have more than enough.
Yeah, the documentary I made was on James Booker of New Orleans. And we discovered in our archival research that there wasn't a single film or video of him performing in the United States at all. And everything that we got was of his European performances.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, so many of those black performers were not recorded. People didn't see fit to film or videotape their performances. But I mean, you're so lucky to have so much of Little Richard.
Yeah, and he arrives on the scene in a great time. In '55, there's not only the rock and roll films, there's performances both here and then abroad. And so it's right as, I think, television and film is expanding, and he's such a dynamic figure who, he found his way to the camera, or it found its way to him. I'm not certain who met who first, but there is a great wealth of material with him.
I love the fact that I never knew where John Waters' mustache came from.
Yeah, John Waters was really fantastic to talk to. That's actually something I wanted to bring into the film. I'm a big fan of Hairspray. And what people don't realize with Hairspray, because they think about, kind of the divine and kind of how John Waters has a particular approach to looking at Baltimore culture, society, it's a commentary on this division of, and certainly what happens with the music to bring kids together, black and white kids. And so I wanted to weave that film in to talk about in the teenager section. But, once you start licensing films, that becomes even more expensive. But hopefully people will make that mental connection of John Waters being there and him creating Hairspray.
Well, I think you did a really good job with all the archival footage you found. Little Richard spoke a lot for himself. And then to have all of those people who worked with him, some of the names we recognize who worked with other entertainers, it was really, really comprehensive. It was just complete. I don't think he'd be ashamed at all.
So, are you still listening to Little Richard, or have you had enough of him?
Oh no, every morning I get up and put on Keep a Knockin'. Because it's a lot of fun, has a lot of energy.
I think we can go to the audience. Is that right? We have the microphones prepared. While we're getting them, why don't you can continue the conversation?
I had a question. I just came from the 75 years of DRES, Disabilities Resources, Education Services at the University of Illinois under Tim Nugent. And I didn't know that Little Richard had a physical disability. Is there more there, or, I mean, he obviously overcame it in certain ways. I don't know if it was his shoes designed a certain way. I mean, Michael had vitiligo. He put the glove on that was designed by Cecily Tyson. I mean, is there some more?
Yeah, he had, one leg that was longer than the other. It caused him to walk, particularly when he was young, with a limp. And then when he became older, he typically would have some type of lift to compensate and balance him out.
Question from the audience?
I have a question to your left. Hi, thank you so much for this film. I have my whole life listened to everybody from Otis Redding to the Beatles to the Stones, and honestly, I really didn't know that he was the originator, and now I do. Thank you so much. But my question is, when he gets that award of merit, and then you show him playing Miss Molly, and I feel like the look on his face, maybe it's just my imagination, he sort of had a look of, okay, people, you're still using me. I still have to perform after you've given me this award. This could just be my imagination, but his face didn't look like when he was all out performing in previous scenes.
That's a good observation. I think oftentimes Richard, despite that award, and he did receive an honorary Grammy, I think that still doesn't fill the space, a very big space, of recognition. So what you gleaned is maybe a really good insight to a certain lack that he still might have felt.
Okay, next question, right down here in front.
Lisa, thank you so much for this film. I had seen it on TV when it aired, but I was so looking forward to seeing this now. Did Richard really, I had no idea how poorly he was treated and how the lack of recognition he got. And so thank you so much for doing this. You filled a big hole. You can't fill it all, but thank you so much for bringing this to us.
And thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. I appreciate it.
Microphone,
From the balcony in the center.
balcony center, vortex.
This is where all the cool kids hang out. Such a terrific film. Thank you so much for doing this. There's another documentary called Revival 69 that is about the Toronto rock and roll revival. Am I right that I saw some
Yes.
of the Pennebaker footage in
Yeah,
this?
that's a film by D.A. Pennebaker.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, and it actually, Ron Chapman had actually taken that footage and turned it into a whole other documentary. But yeah, I recognize the mirror suit from that footage. That was amazing to see that.
Yeah, Pennebaker it's a beautiful film. I mean, I think I love the range of all the stories that he told, but that's one of my favorites. And I've talked with his widow, Chris Hedges, a lot about that film.
Microphone,
I have a question to your left.
Thank you for a really great film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd like to go back to the issue of recognition, though. I mean, this is a man who was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't know, growing up, I always considered him one of the foundational people of rock and roll. So is it accurate that he didn't get the recognition that he deserved, or is it more that he felt he didn't, especially given that he wasn't monetarily compensated?
I think Richard lives in the gray. You know, he's never black or white. His life is a roller coaster. So, you know, for those in the know, I mean, you know, there's people like John Fogerty who love Little Richard. There's so many artists who do. I think he had such great popularity when he first came on the scene that never happened again. And he saw people bypassing him. And it just fed something in him that says, if they really were recognizing me, why aren't you still recording me? You know, like when he's inducting Otis Redding in. And that's a really great clip to watch on YouTube. It's like 20 minutes long. It's quite telling because he goes in this whole thing, which we had cut down dramatically, of all that he did, everyone that he supported. And it still is, he's still carrying, I think, this disappointment of them surpassing him not getting opportunities, and being relegated to an oldies tour. But then you hear someone like Mick Jagger say, like, yeah, we all loved him and, you know, recognized what he gave, but they didn't take him on the road to open up. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing when someone's gone to talk about how much you love them. It's another thing to actively exercise that when they're with you.
you know, he died in 2020 during the pandemic. Was he one of the ones who was not allowed to have, I remember had some friends died who couldn't have funerals, or they would have, you could only have like maybe 5 people in the church or something. Do you know what kind of
Yeah, he returned
funeral did he
to
have?
Oakwood, you know, the Seventh-day Adventist school, and he was buried on the cemetery there. And they did do it within a timely fashion after his passing. Yeah.
And what are you working on now, Lisa? Because I know you're always busy.
I am, well, I've been supporting a film that I did on black astronauts called The Space Race. which is on Disney Plus and Hulu, and developing a bunch of new projects with the company. We have a series in the crime space, but it's with a social justice component and a call to action. You know, crime is a very popular genre, but I had to find a way into it as a storyteller that would be complementary to what I think is my purpose and my plan as a filmmaker.
Could you compare working in the documentary space versus the narrative space?
Well, you know, when I was producing narrative films, what I can say is that, you know, you have your script and you kind of know what it's going to be. Obviously, the performances, the director's vision affect the quality. The thing about a doc, though, is you start out, it always happens, going down one path, you think it's this story, and then there's a curveball. There's as you are spending time with the character or the worlds that they inhabited, you discover, like, I knew nothing about, like, this examination of queerness would be an important part of this film. But then when I'm like, wait a minute, there's Escarita, there's Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who are these people? They are so important, and we never hear them, and we don't put a face to these incredible people. And I didn't think about them at the beginning of the film, but that was something that really came to me as an important part of the story that needed to be shared.
Yeah, you write a documentary as you make it, as opposed to a feature film which you write before you shoot it.
Yeah.
We have one more question from the audience before we break to go to dinner, over
right
here.
I've got one question.
Yeah, I loved in the movie how you would like open up the cosmos and show the universe, like whenever Little Richard was performing. What inspired you to make that creative choice?
'Cause it's Little Richard, baby. But, you know, it's like, it's the Big Bang when he arrives. He is shifting the atmosphere. He is introducing something elemental we have never seen before. Everyone who saw him, they spoke about how it changed their lives. And so those visual elements were what I felt was the best to depict how important his presence was, and how he didn't just arrive, but he continued to influence so many artists. And it's why I posit at the end of the film, I don't think you can have a Little Nas X if you didn't have the spirit and the energy of Little Richard. And then you know what? At Halloween this year, Little Nas X dressed up like Little Richard. He did a whole spread recreating all the classic images, outfits of Richard. And Little Nas X is his own artist. He's not, you know, but I think there is something in the structural integrity of performance and freedom and otherness that Richard embodied that is then absorbed in so many different ways, whether it's Little Nas or David Bowie.
You know, actually, I do have one more question that I wondered. When you were doing your research, you know, when Little Richard would shift from his rock and roll persona to embrace gospel and religion more, how well was he accepted within the religious community? Because over the years, I would hear, okay, Little Richard's preaching, but that's just you know, they say, oh, that's just something he's doing for now. It's not really serious. And I didn't feel that he was being taken seriously. In this movie, I think that he really did take his religion seriously, but how well was he received in the religious community?
He definitely found a home there, and even, you know, the third performer, Pastor John P. Key, has always been in gospel music. His father was in gospel music, And Pastor Key was telling me that he knew Richard, you know, and he knew him in the gospel music sense. Corey Henry, who plays in the Tutti Frutti scene, came up in the church, as did his parents and his grandparents, and they're musicians, and they all had a connection to him through the gospel music, not through, you know, the popular hits. So, you know, I think that first gospel record that he does that Quincy Jones produces is gorgeous. And for people in that community, they definitely found, they heard the sincerity of his voice and his testimony.
Thank you so much, Lisa Cortez. Let's.
Thank you.
Can I hand you this? So I can figure out how to get up. I'll just
Did your
prop
leg
myself
fall?
up.
Did your leg fall asleep?
Oh, there we go.
Sometimes I
I'm
cross
up.
my legs and I'm in trouble. I'm like, oh.
I didn't want to get up and go splat. That would not be good. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful.
You feel
Wonderful. Wonderful to see it
again,
again.
historically, this is important in the history of that.
Yeah, because that,